Hello there. It's 11 o'clock in Los Angeles, and if you're in America, you've got the whole day ahead of you. If you're in Europe or somewhere else, then it may be the end of the day. But I'm delighted you could join me. I'm Ken Robinson, and we've had a campaign running for some time now, and it's been on Twitter all day. It's the Dirt is Good campaign, which is being organised through Periscope UK and OMO. And we've had a lot of interesting questions about the campaign, what it's trying to achieve, and also what people can do in response to it. I live these days in California. You probably gathered I'm not actually from here. I'm from the UK, so I have a pretty good sense, I think, of some of the constraints. I'm also a parent. I have two children of my own, my wife and I. I mean, they're grown up now, but they're 31 and 26. But you know, we have all the concerns that I think all parents have about their children, about giving the right balance of play and activity and education and the rest. And trying to get that balance right is a big challenge. So what's this campaign about? Well, firstly, the whole premise of the Dirt is Good campaign is that play in all its forms isn't some frivolous waste of time that needlessly takes up children's day and that should be put to one side if there are more important things to do. All the evidence is that play is a highly beneficial and deeply natural way in which kids learn. You know, all species, I mean, all species that look like us, I'm not talking about amoeba and bacteria particularly, but animate creatures like us, we play a lot, and play has deeply important roles in development of intellectual skills, in social skills, in developing empathy, in stretching our imaginations, in exploring our creativity. It's a very, very important part of children's early development, and most early educators, of course, have always understood that. Parents know it naturally too. And there's a raft of evidence that supports that view, that play is functional, beneficial, and essential in children's lives. So that's one side of all this, that it's important, and we want to make the point that play is important. But you might say, well, okay, we get that. What's the problem? Well, the problem is that children on the whole seem to be playing less these days, or certainly playing differently. There are a couple of strands to this. One of them is that there's much less, on the basis of the research we've done, much less outdoor play than there used to be. I know when I was growing up, I was constantly playing outdoors. I mean, my parents pushed us all out the door and shut it, and we came back later on at tea time. That was perfectly normal, you know, for people of my generation, that you just played outside. The reasons now why it happens less, and it seems to be happening quite a bit less. Well, the research we did came up with some startling figures. You know, we looked at parents' views, attitudes, and behaviour in response to play in 10 different parts of the world. About 12,000 parents altogether were surveyed. And the startling top-line figure that came out is that very many children, a majority actually, spend less time playing outdoors now than the average high-security prisoner spends outdoors. According to the UN, there's an entitlement for how much time prisoners who are in high-security institutions need to be outdoors to benefit from being outside in the daylight and being able to move physically. Children spend less time than that for the most part. In some cases, less than an hour a day outdoors. So kids are playing less in certain ways. You know, play covers a whole range of different activities. And we've tried, we'll be publishing more materials about this, to offer a definition of play, you know, something that's undertaken for its own sake, for the pleasure of it, for the enjoyment of it, in a way that is purely intrinsic to itself. It's not there to do something else. It's something that is an exploratory activity that is engaged in for the fun and enjoyment that it brings in itself. There are all kinds of play. You know, there's dressing up play, there's dramatic play, there's social play, there's very physical play. And of course, kids play a lot now on technology. When I say kids are playing less, what particularly focusing on in this campaign is they're spending less time outdoors and doing less physical play, and in some ways less social play as well. Well, why is that? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is that parents these days seem to be a good deal more anxious about letting their kids go out and play outdoors. They worry about the environments they may be playing in and the dangers they may find there. I mean, the evidence is, of course, that crime rates, insofar as they're a factor in parents' concerns, are in many cases going down. The publicity of these dangers is often greater than the actual danger itself, but nonetheless, parents are anxious, and we understand that. I certainly understand that kind of anxiety. Secondly, there is a decline in some areas in places to play. You know, the vast majority of kids now live in cities. That's relatively recent in human history. We, on the whole, as a species, lived out in the countryside, and now we're cramming much more into cities, and these cities are plagued with all kinds of other pressures and traffic, not least. And public spaces are very important, and in some areas these have been neglected or they're in decline. A third one is that schools are giving less time to play. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Playtime's being cut back, outdoor playtime. And a big factor, of course, is kids are spending a lot of time on video games. Let me say right away here, this isn't a campaign against technology or video games. Video games can be fantastic, and they're not just for kids. Video games cover every type of game, including the ones that I'm mentioning, the imaginative play, creative play, social play, and so on. But nonetheless, the issue we're pressing for is balance. Children often do spend more time on their back or sitting down with looking at screens than they do outdoors. There's some evidence that quite a lot of kids around the world, for example, prefer to play FIFA, and other football games indoors on their phones or their iPads than going outside and playing actual football. So there's an imbalance here, which is also fueled to some extent by the problems of anxiety and cultural factors affecting it. But in the middle of all this, the importance of play remains constant, and so the campaign is about that. And so why am I involved in it? Because I believe very strongly in the importance of developing children's natural talents. I believe very strongly in the importance of creativity. I believe very strongly in the importance of children learning together and being active and being physical. I think these are processes which are vital to their development, and I'm not alone in thinking of it, and they are to some degree at risk for these reasons. And this particular campaign is aimed particularly at parents to draw their attention to these issues, but more than that, to try and give practical support to look at ways in which they can help to remedy them and face their own particular issues and say, well, I live here, I live there, these things are less easy for me, so what do I do? Often parents are very busy, two parents are working, maybe there's just one parent and they come home late and they're very stressed out with other things. So we're trying as well to offer some practical remedies to all of this. So this is what a lot of these questions have been about. So let me just look at some of the other questions that have come up through the Twitter campaign. Commonly people have said, parents want to know how much time should my child be playing with everything else that we're juggling. Now, juggling is a form of play, of course, but I know what they mean. You've got so many different factors to balance. I think, a lot of this is about paying attention to your children. I say this as a parent. I'm not saying it in some theoretical way. It's hard to overestimate how valuable it is to your kids that you spend time with them just to be with them, just to play and fool around with them and be focused and to give them your attention. It might just be 10 minutes here and there, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. That you don't have to set the clock and say, okay, here we go, quality time for the next 45 minutes, but it has to be over by the time the news comes on. It's about realizing that these are very important relationships as your children develop, and to them there are very few people, if anybody, more important than you as a parent, and having your attention undivided and to be with them is tremendously valuable for them, and also of course for you. You make time, we all have to make time for everything else. I do. You have to make time for work, pay the bills, travel, all the things we do. But one of the reasons we're doing this is to have a quality of life, and it's important not to ignore the factors that make life worth living for your children, to spend that time with them, indoors or outdoors. We're arguing, of course, that there are big benefits in getting outdoors as well. We'll come to that. But even if it's just 10, 15 minutes a day playing a game with them indoors, that has a tremendous benefit. As I say, we're not trying to set the clock here, but there is a website you might want to go to. It's called Dirt is Good, and there are lots of practical resources there and examples that you might find interesting and helpful. And partly through this social media campaign, we're trying to encourage conversation between parents and get parents to listen to each other, to talk with each other, and to collaborate where they can to see if there are common issues here that they can help to solve collectively. So it is important. It's not important also not to set the clock and say it has to be exactly this amount of time, but nonetheless, pay attention to it. Incidentally, the survey that we did with Personal showed that half of all parents said they recognise these benefits and they want to play with their children more and they want their children to play outside more. So it's not as if people don't get it. They do. It's a question of paying attention to it and saying, well, how practically can we make it happen? Another issue that comes up a lot is this one. Is this issue around play all technology's fault? Well, as I say, this isn't a campaign against technology. I'm talking to you, aren't I, on an iPhone right now. And I'm not being a Luddite about technology, nor is anybody involved in this campaign. It's about balance. And you can see where the balance starts to shift. If your children spend all day or all their free time doing nothing but being in front of screens, then that starts to raise issues about the balance and dynamic of their daily lives. So it's not to argue against them. In fact, there are some very interesting programs out there just now, you might look at them, which are beginning to combine video games with outdoor activity. It's a hybrid form. One of them is called hybrid play. And it's about using the technology to bridge work in activities outdoors. So no, it's not a campaign against that. It's a campaign for balance between the two. Again, the research showed this, that about 85% of parents believe their children are more creative when they play without technology. You've got to tread a bit carefully around that because technology can be fantastically creative. But then there are just benefits that come, which are different from making things up in free play. Getting dressed up, making up games, playing out in the garden, getting on a climbing frame, and inventing things for yourself. I remember when my son and daughter were, he was I think 10 at the time, and she would have been 6. And we got them their first laptop computer, and I was setting this thing up for my son upstairs, and my daughter was downstairs in the garden, and she found a piece of old rope, and she asked me to make a swing, and I did. Interestingly, Kate and James spent the entire summer on the piece of rope, playing on the swing, making up all these games, while the computer sat upstairs. I was trying to play on the computer myself, actually. But the imaginative stimulation, physical stimulation they got from being on the rope was fantastic to watch. They were just endlessly inventive. They kind of wore a huge hole in the garden as a consequence. So it's not stigmatising one or the other. It's seeing what the relative benefits are between the two of them. 84% of parents, worth noting though, don't think that playing on screens is in itself as beneficial as other forms of play. Well, different forms of play bring you different benefits. So I say we're arguing for balance. So, excuse me. The next question that's come up often, and of course I've written a lot around education, and I have a book out just now called Creative Schools, which talks about these things in a bit more detail. But this question goes straight to it. It says, do you think schools should be doing more to support play? Yes. Yeah, there's a long answer and a short answer. Yes. For all kinds of reasons, our kids are spending, I think, far too much time being sedentary, sitting down, being physically inactive, when they should be up and about, moving, doing practical activities and playing. They say that there is some view out there that play somehow is not serious. It's, of course, the word itself tends to sometimes give fuel to that idea, but play is a fantastically serious activity in terms of children's development and their relationships with other people. We looked at one study here from Professor Peter Blatchford. There's a link. If you go to our website, you'll find it, which says that in the UK, outdoor play in schools in the past 30 years has been cut in half from 90 minutes to 45 minutes. And you know this to be true, that playtime is often cut back. It's not true in all schools, by the way. Some schools are doing fantastic work and really are encouraging their kids to get outdoors and to play, but too many are finding it difficult to do that. And we really want to get this higher up the agenda and the priority list and say that this is a very important part of the school day. In respect of which, there's a really good initiative. It's called Empty Classroom Day, and we're partnering with them which is an invitation to spend the day outdoors, to learn outdoors. Of course, some schools do this anyhow. It can be harder in urban environments than rural ones, but not impossible. There are many facilities in cities that we need to explore, parks, urban farms and so on. Empty Classroom Day this year is on June the 17th, and we really do encourage you to get involved in that and to find out how you can do that and where the activities are that will be near enough to your particular school. But if you go to the website, you'll find that. Empty Classroom Day, June 17th. Another question here. My kids don't want to play outside anymore. How can I make them? Well, look, let me say first off here that, of course, we're not talking here about putting your kids at risk. If you live in a large block of flats in a difficult area, or you live next to a motorway, or if you're in a difficult urban setting where there's lots of traffic, or for any other reason that you might have an anxiety, of course we're not suggesting for a minute you just open the door, shove your kids out and say see you later. We're talking about safe play in areas that are supervised, but also unstructured play. This is the interesting balance to strike. You want your kids to be able to just play freely and make things up as they go and invent and fantasize and do things kids do that are natural to childhood. But we need that to be in a safe space. You don't want them to be at risk. So we do have some suggestions there as well. If you go to the Dirt is Good website, you will see some more materials and resources. And we are urging people in positions of public policy to recognise the importance of playgrounds, of safe playgrounds, adventure playgrounds. There's a fantastic movement to create more playgrounds in the UK. There's a big one here in the US. It's called Kaboom. It's a fantastic programme. So we want our kids to be supervised, safe, but not necessarily constantly being organised. That's the point. You need time to play freely and to explore your own imagination with your peer group, with your friends. So if you're worried about sending that outside, look at the resources. By the way, most big cities now do have, of course, they have parks and programmes, and we encourage you to find out about those, and we very much encourage the people who provide these parks and spaces to recognise the importance of safe, supervised programmes for play. How can we keep kids off devices without holding them back developmentally? Well, again, so we're not arguing that you should keep them off devices. Some of these games have wonderful benefits cognitively and perceptually, and also in terms of hand-eye coordination. The jury's out a bit, on the long-term effects of overexposure to games and what sort of games are appropriate at what age, and we'll be saying a bit more about that in some papers we'll be producing. But as I say, we're not arguing against the importance, but the need to see them in a balanced portfolio of kids' activities. Do you think children should start playing unsupervised in today's world? Well, as I say, not necessarily unsupervised. Yes, unstructured at times, of course. That's important. But we all want, as parents, for our children to be safe. But we need them to be able to take risks, to be able to fall down, get up, graze their knees, and dust themselves off and carry on again. These are the ways in which children learn to become much more resilient, to become more independent. And there is a point at which, and all parents have to find this balance, at which overprotecting your children is counterproductive. It's very hard to see your children fall down and cut themselves and hurt themselves, and we're not suggesting it should be done deliberately, but it's all part of life's lessons, isn't it? That you do need to figure out where the boundaries are and the risks you can take and in the nature of it. Kids need to get dirty. That's why we call this Dirt is Good. It's about striking a balance between safety and overprotectionism. And finally, what can we do to get more playtime out of our child's day? Well, again, go to the website if you would. Find some time in the day. I know it's hard sometimes with all these pressures, but the benefits are fantastic. And these are the times in your own life as a parent that you look back on and treasure, the times you had with your kids when it was just you playing and getting the pleasure out of being a parent, as well as experiencing what inevitably a lot of the stresses and strains of being a parent. And your children simply won't forget these times if they come well enough and often enough and with the right kind of quality. So it's a very important campaign. I think it's part of a bigger campaign to try and get the balance into our children's lives, to get them to feel not just the benefits of play, but of a proper diet, of sleep. We'll be talking about all of those things a little bit later on. But for the moment, I just want to thank you for taking an interest in the campaign. I know as parents it matters to you a lot that your kids get the right balance of activities. I do want to thank Purcell for organising the campaign. I'm very pleased to be part of it and to be part of the conversation. And by the way, it's not just the UK, it's a global conversation. It's important to recognise that too. Our children live in very challenging times, and so do we. There's no question of it. The pressures are intense. They're particularly intense from education. You may know the work I do is a lot to do with trying to ease some of the pressures in education, or at least to have more productive pressures, ones that aren't just devoted to a narrow form of testing and sedentary forms of learning. But these are challenging times. We live in a complicated world, but in the middle of it, there are some principles that hold good about the nature of childhood and what makes a valuable one and an effective one. So thank you again for being part of it. Our best wishes to you in all your efforts to be the best parent and to give your children a childhood they'll recall. Thank you.